Sound speed.
Marker.
Action.
Check, check. Check 1, 2.
Son of a...
Sound speed. Action.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me today for another episode of True Audio Presents. My name is Thomas Popp, and today we've got a great episode today. I've got Carl Winkler from Lectrosonics here. How are you doing, sir?
Doing very well. Thanks, Thomas.
All right, and today we're here to talk all about the new SM digital transmitters that just came out last week. Is that right?
Absolutely. We're going to talk about those and how they fit into the whole picture of our digital products these days.
Excellent. So, you know what? I want to dive right in and start with probably the question that you're going to get the most, which is about compatibility, because a lot of people just know that a lot of your older products, they kind of work with everything, but this might be a little bit different. Talk to me about compatibility.
Sure thing. Yes, and we are getting that question. And, you know, the digital hybrid products were wonderful because they introduced the idea of cross-compatibility, backwards compatibility, which hadn't been done before. And by using an FM, radio link and digital processed audio, we were able to go backwards and grow forwards. And that product line was introduced quite a while ago and has held up incredibly well. So with the introduction of the new DBSM and DBSMD transmitters, we're getting the questions, hey, can I use this with my SRC? Can I use this with my Venue 2, my Venue 1, and my 411, things like that? And the answer is no. Pure digital transmitters, while it's technically possible to make them backwards compatible, it would basically mean two transmitters in one, which would be impractical from cost standpoint, battery consumption, complexity, and size. So these are pure digital transmitters, and they won't work with a hybrid receiver or an analog receiver. So that's number one. But the receivers, digital receivers, and we'll get into this a little bit more detail, but like the DCR822 and the DSQD in particular are backwards compatible with hybrid transmitters. And in one case, the M2R can do an IFB mono signal as well. So let's get into a little bit about systems and the ecosystem itself. And hopefully everyone's familiar with the DCHR. That's this guy here, and this is a mono or stereo single channel receiver. That's another question we get is, can I use two DBSMs with one DCHR? And the answer is no there as well. The DCHR was designed to be either a digital camera hop type receiver, in other words, a stereo receiver picking up one transmitter with two channels of audio, or a mono receiver. So in a way, it's like the updated version of the LR with a lot of new enhancements. And so the DCHR has got a headphone output, so it can double as an IFB receiver or a channel check receiver, and that's a kind of unique function. Imagine using this receiver to check your talent mics because it tunes across the whole band from 470 to 608, and can pick up any digital transmitter, mono or stereo, and with a headphone out. So you wouldn't need anything else to go and check each of your talent's mics as long as they're using a digital transmitter. So the DCHR, of course, was originally conceived as a camera hop receiver paired with the DCHT, which is also a single channel stereo transmitter. And that's this one. So that makes a pair. So right away, you can kind of see that the DCHR receiver has got double duty. It can be a single channel, tiny little system, working as like a small camera receiver plugged straight into the camera with one talent microphone. It could be a wonderful portable digital system. So that's the first one I wanted to talk about. And Thomas, are you familiar with the DCHR, and have you taken a look at what's in there?
I have. One of the things that I love most about the DCHR is the robustness. I know that if I put that on a camera, it's going to be safe. It's not, even if it gets bashed up against a wall or whatever, it's a tank basically. It's going to withstand the elements, and now that it's completely digital with the DBSM, it's just a great pairing for any type of camera hop, or like you said, a single channel portable system that you need anywhere. It's a great option.
Yeah, it's done very, very well for us. And we have had some requests for a silicone cover, the covers that we started on the HMA transmitter for like news and weather and stuff like that. And so requests started coming in for additional ones. And I just have it on my desk today. This is the sample cover for the DCHR receiver. So we'll have that out pretty soon. And then another thing about it is that, like the LR, which in a sense it's the descendant of the LR in many ways, it's mounted in the same way. We've got some questions about this too. How do I mount this on a camera? Well, of course, there's Velcro and things like that you might do, and people often do. But you can also use the LR shoe mount system. And that just clips on the back with the belt clip. Belt clip is one of these wire belt clips, and the LR shoe fits right on the back. And then that could be mounted on a camera on a cold shoe, that kind of thing. And then the antennas that it comes with are the elbowed type. So those could be set up to receive properly by being vertical and splayed a little bit. So that's the DCHR as it is part of this digital ecosystem. And the two different modes that you can use with the DBSM transmitters are the D2 mode, which is the standard digital full bandwidth, and the different power settings, 10 milliwatts, 25 or 50, or the new HDM mode. And we'll talk a little bit more about HDM, but don't forget to tune into the Sound Summit later this week, because we're going to get into a lot of detail on HDM. So the DCHR allows you to tune into the HDM mode as well. So if you don't have the update yet, go to the website, look at support at lectrosonics.com, firmware, and DCHR, and there you should see the latest update, which includes the HDM high density mode operating. Okay. Thomas, any other thoughts, questions about DCHR and how it fits in with the DBSM?
No, I think that's a perfect scenario for people that need a couple single systems in a bag. But what happens if people have a little bit of a bigger requirement? They need multiple channels. What would people do next?
Sure. Well, the top of the line really in the digital receivers is the DCR-822, and that's this model here. And of course, it's got two channels of audio, two independent receivers in one, and allows you to pick up backwards compatible, hybrid, like we talked about a few minutes ago, all the different hybrid modes from NA hybrid, NU hybrid, EU hybrid, JA hybrid, okay, as well as the latest ones, the D2 mode and the HDM mode. And it can also pick up stereo transmitters like the DCHT or the M2T. So the 822, incredibly versatile and designed for bag use, obviously, with the display on the top and the two antennas on the top with SMA connectors and analog or AES outputs along the bottom. It can be battery powered, and it can be powered from an external source. So that's the 822. One thing that people may not know is that with stereo transmitters, like if in the case where you had a DCHT coming into one of the channels, one of the receiver channels on the 822, you can still get stereo digital out via the AES connector on the bottom. So you really can get 4 channels of audio out of a DCR 822. Now people ask us, can you do 4 independent transmitters? No, it can't do that. It's designed as a 2-channel receiver, each channel having the vector diversity, which is our latest development in the diversity realm, and extremely robust front-end architecture. The 411A was long sort of the benchmark for tough radios, and was big and heavy, and yet we still see a ton of those out there. The DCR-822 is designed to succeed the 411 specifically by having an even more robust radio receiver front end and the new vector diversity on both channels. So you can imagine that it's going to be a popular combination, the DBSM family transmitters and the DCR-822 receivers, particularly for mobile portable bag type systems.
Yeah, it's great because it's one of those systems that you could have in your bag, or if you needed a couple extra systems that you needed to throw into a cart. It just makes your system more expansive depending on what you're doing. I love it.
Absolutely. And one thing that gets overlooked often is the fact that the DCR-822 can record directly onto a card there on the front. There's a micro SD card slot, and it can record however many channels of audio are coming in. So if, for instance, you've got one mono transmitter and one stereo transmitter, you got three channels of audio. It'll record those on independent tracks in the dot wave format. So for the walk test that I did with HDM mode, which you'll see in the video later this week, I just stuck this out there, went outside and put a card in it and started recording, and then walked and did my walk test with nothing but the receiver and a transmitter. And it worked great. Sounds really good.
I think something to reiterate with that capability, being able to record locally on the receiver now, since that's in your bag or that's on your cart, that opens up the option of you having backup ISO tracks, so you may not necessarily have to have multiple backup recorders because they're recording in other places. So it's just,
Right.
having redundancy everywhere is always a good thing.
That was the idea, exactly. And some folks have asked us, what do I do with this recorder? And you've answered the most basic one, which is the reason we did it in the first place, as a backup recorder for those ISO tracks. But once in a while, in a pinch, talk about run and gun. Your entire system can consist of a little bag with one of these and a transmitter, and maybe a headphone amp, and you've recorded directly onto the receiver. So in a pinch, it could also work as a complete system.
We have a couple questions, Carl. Someone is asking,
Yep.
what is the runtime on the DCHR on batteries fully charged versus the DBSM?
Runtime on DCHR, I'd have to look up those figures, but just shooting from the hip, I would say about 4 to 5 hours on rechargeables fully charged. Lithium batteries run more like 7 hours. And then, alkalines, we don't really recommend. These units are a little bit current hungry for that. So you get a pretty short runtime, maybe a couple of hours on decent alkalines. And this is fairly similar to the runtime of the DBSM, but it does depend on the RF power setting that you have. If you're running in HDM mode, at 2 milliwatts, the battery's going to run quite a long time. The dual battery unit with lithium batteries running at HDM will run something like 18 hours. So single battery unit, less by about half. But, in other words, it's going to be similar. A DBSM running with a DCHR, both using rechargeable batteries, and let's say running at 25 milliwatts, you get a similar runtime. I think if that's what they're asking.
Yeah,
I think, other questions?
Yeah, and in fact, he asked another question, and you were kind of answering it, but it brings up a really good topic. He says, what is the range with the digital workflow? And, he asked this right when you were talking about, the RF output capabilities, the 10 milliwatt and so forth. You can go all the way up to 50. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think the nature of his question is that, compared with hybrid transmitters or other systems that you might be familiar with, kind of reminds me a little bit of like in photography, when everything started going digital and smaller frame sizes, and people needed equivalents for their lens focal lengths, right? Like this is equivalent to 28 millimeters on a 35 millimeter camera. Digital and analog or hybrid are going to be quite different in the way that, you've got an average power, which is what you see, like if you see that the max power setting on the DBSM is 50 milliwatts, that's your average power, versus 50 milliwatts on a hybrid system, for example. Also average, but the difference is that with the digital, you get a much greater peak to average ratio, which means that the peak power coming out of these units is quite a bit higher. It's just it's very short duration. But because of that, you're getting ranges beyond what you would expect for a 50 milliwatt setting. And in general, the rule of thumb that I've encountered is that it's about 2 to 1, roughly. So 50 milliwatts on a digital system, if it's well designed and you're on a good channel and everything, will give you about equivalent to 100 milliwatts in a hybrid system. And a few years ago, and we've got this on our YouTube channel, but we did a test with a 50 milliwatt transmitter. It was the DB, the forerunner of the DBU. Set at 50 milliwatts, and we got a mile out of it. We stuck it on top of Gordon's car. He drove, And the only time we lost it is when it went over a hill literally a mile away. So 50 milliwatts is quite a bit in the digital realm. And that's why you're seeing lower power settings coming along, like 50, 25, and 10, instead of the older, 50, 100, 250. It's not practical to put, a 100 milliwatt digital transmitter out in a belt pack format. Battery life wouldn't be very good. They'd warm up quite a bit because the final stage has to be really linear to keep that digital signal intact while transmitting. So you're not going to see powers like that coming out of little tiny belt packs. And you'll notice that this is true of all different manufacturers making digital transmitters.
Yeah, you don't really have those power capabilities, and you don't really need those power capabilities because of the digital capabilities and the way that it works.
But an important thing here, though, is that digital and analog, FM, are going to behave differently. And so there's scenarios where people have probably run into this, where they feel like the digital isn't giving them the range that they expect. And then there's people telling us that digital is giving them better range than they expect. In fact, I got a text today from Dan McCoy talking about using HDM mode 2 milliwatts and going through concrete walls and having absolutely phenomenal reception.
Wow.
So, I think a lot of it has to do with your antenna placement, your RF gain structure, how you choose your frequencies. These things matter more with digital, and having a really clean signal path is going to give you a lot more performance than if you simply swap out your system with a digital unit and then wonder why it's not working to your expectations. The analog is a little more forgiving, and hybrid and systems like that. So need to be more exact, but there's definitely the performance is there.
For sure. We got a couple more questions. It might kind of take us on a journey, but do you want to see where it leads us?
Let's see where we go. I may be, maybe something I'm going to answer in a minute, but let's see what we got.
Exactly. Well, this one's asking about what antennas would you use if you say the talent was far away? So if we're talking about using the digital SM transmitters and, let's say the DCR-822, if you were using that in a bag, what type of antennas do you think might be, an option for them?
Sure. Well, if we're talking about the bag and the A22, a really nice option is going to be the coax antennas. And I don't know if you've got any pictures.
No,
of those,
I don't think I have those. I think I have all of the big wings, so I'll just flip off of those. I try to be prepared.
That's cool. But, coax antennas are really a secret weapon. And I think we've got a YouTube video on our channel that shows, Gordon talks about how to make them. They're not that difficult to make. You can buy like RG174 SMA, cables, little coax cables, cut them off at whatever length you find convenient, and then strip back the appropriate length to make the antenna, which becomes a dipole at the end. And so that instruction's out there. We do sell them as well. They're block specific. They're tuned antennas. They have about 100 megahertz of bandwidth. But those antennas can be really great to get the antennas out of the bag itself. I mean, whip antennas do very well. Quarter wave whips are pretty efficient and will work very well in most circumstances. But if you're looking for extra range, you want to get your antennas higher up. And then, the next step from there would be to use something like SNA 600s on stands, and then, BNC to SMA adapter cables. And beyond that, maybe directional antennas. But, if you're talking about the HDM mode, which is a very low power mode, we found that Omni antennas work better because they're picking up all the reflected signals, not just the one directly from the unit in the primary direction of the antenna pointing. So that's something to think about as well. And I recommend everyone should experiment with whatever antennas you can get your hands on. And I'm guessing, Thomas, like True, probably rents antennas.
Absolutely. We have tons of antennas for sale as well as rental. So just contact your local sales rep or rental rep, and they can definitely help you out. And, again, to reiterate, it is kind of a tough question to just answer, but it does bring up a good topic of conversation because it is about the scenario. Like you were saying, an Omni antenna is great when you're indoors with all of those reflections. But if you're going to be outside just in the middle of nowhere, like the desert, maybe you do need those straight shooting log periodic antennas, shark fins.
Yeah, that's the general rule of thumb is, shorter distance, wider coverage is going to be better with Omnis. But one thing I want to mention too, people say, hey, look, I want to get the most range out of this. And they're thinking on the receiver side, which is true. And you need to have good gain structure, as I mentioned earlier. Good filtering helps. Our filtered antenna, the LP690, is a handy tool and is becoming more popular as more digital systems get out there. It's a way of, it's got filtering, but also attenuation. More signal is not always better, and that's something we run into a lot. But let me talk just for a minute about the transmitter antenna. You can also use that same coax type antenna. These antennas are removable with an SMA connector, so you can put a coax antenna that would then go up the person and possibly stick out somewhere, if that's possible, in the costume, or come up and come off the hat, or be away from the body is the main thing. But if you're going to stick with whips, which most people do, we recommend that you try to insulate this from the body somehow. So first off, just make sure that antenna doesn't contact the person's skin. That will cause the RF signal to be attenuated severely. So anything you can do, and one of the great tricks is to put a little length of shrink tubing over this, and then shrink it on the connector, and then shrink it a little and pinch it off up here, and then maybe cut it nice and round and smooth. So it's like an air tube insulator on that antenna to keep it away from the body. You can also use a little foam pad or anything to keep that away from the person's skin, or folds of their body, that kind of thing. And it depends on the person. Some people don't have a lot of padding, and it's not such a big deal. Some people do. Transmitter placement also. Put it down on the ankle. Put it in a hat. Put it in a wig, as opposed to just sticking it in the small of their back, where the chances are fairly good that it's going to be attenuated quite a bit. So some experimentation there too. But play around. Get a willing friend, colleague, spouse, significant other, whatever. And experiment with transmitter placement. You'll see it makes a very big difference in terms of transmission range and signal strength.
Love it. Love it. So where we left off, we were talking a lot about, we talked about the DCHR, we talked about the 822. What about the DSQD? You want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yes. And essentially the DSQD is like the 822, but in a rack format in many ways, in terms of its compatibility. It's compatible with, of course, the latest ones, and it's got both the D2 and the HDM compatibility mode. And again, if it's not in your unit, that means you haven't updated your unit. So go to our website, support, firmware, DSQD, download the latest version, and update through Wireless Designer. And I didn't mention with the 822, you can update it by simply moving that file onto the micro SD card and then sticking it in the unit. You don't need to connect it to a computer or use Wireless Designer. But with the DSQD, you do need to use Wireless Designer to update that unit. So like the 822, the DSQD is backwards compatible with our hybrid transmitters, NA hybrid, EU hybrid, NU hybrid, JA hybrid. And then it is also compatible with the D2 mode and the HDM mode for these mono transmitters. And it's also able to pick up stereo channels, like from an M2T or a DC-HT. The only difference there is that in this case, there's only 4 audio outputs. So if you're picking up a stereo transmitter and you need both of those audio channels, you got to use 2 of the channels at the receiver to do that in the case of the DSQD.
Gotcha.
So that's one slight difference between that and the 822 in that regard. But you've got Dante as well. So that's instead of AES, well, there is the AES variant of the DSQD, and that's got analog outputs and AES outputs. And then the more popular by far is the Dante version. It's got analog outputs and Dante digital outputs.
So there's definitely a DSQD for you, depending on what setup you need.
Yeah, we had a number of requests for the AES version. I think people hooking them up to certain types of mixers. Kantar is an example where they've got several AES inputs there, and it saves some of the mic preamp type inputs from requiring an analog hookup. So it makes a lot of sense there.
Mm-hmm. And we had a comment, Robert is saying, love the heat shrink on antenna tip, and that's absolutely a great tip. Another one for you guys too is if you get the Ursa foamies that you use for lavaliers, you can throw those on. So if you just need a quick hit in the field and you don't have heat shrink or anything like that, you can throw those on, just like 3 or 4 of them to get that separation. Because like you said, once that antenna touches that body of water in our stomach or our thighs or anything like that, it's going to go away.
Yeah, and just one last comment there. I think as transmitters got smaller and smaller, we're down, here's the little itty bitty SSM, which is compatible with the DSQD and the A22. And I bring it up because we started hearing from people, they're saying, oh, I'm not getting the range at 50 milliwatts that I would expect. Why isn't that the case? And my theory has long been that, hey, it's smaller and easier to hide on the body, so it's stuck in places where you wouldn't normally stick a transmitter because it'll fit. And therefore, it's suffering from a lot of absorption. So you got to be really careful with that one, with the SSM, and any tiny transmitter like that. Absorption is a real issue.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. There's so many people that don't understand hiding the pack is almost as important as where you're hiding the microphone. Because if you're putting it in that wrong place, it's just covering it up and not allowing it to speak out.
Yep,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's. Somebody's asking, any plans to release a DSQD in a rack mount version? I mean, in theory, you could get a rack mount tray and mount the DSQDs, but is there something that you could do if you didn't want to do it that way?
Yes, actually, this is designed for rack use. It's exactly a half rack space, and it comes with half the hardware you need to rack mount these. So if you get two of them, you have all the hardware you need to rack mount them side by side. Rack flanges, the little D handles to help you pull it out of the rack and everything, and the brackets to connect them.
Oh, perfect.
If you only want to mount one, there's an accessory kit. I forget exact part number, but it's an accessory kit that mounts one of these that gives you the other half, essentially, of the rack hardware. It's just a blank front panel with a bracket, and you mount it on the unit. You've already got the other half of the hardware with the unit itself, and you're ready to go. So we see these mounted in racks all the time. Everything from carts to theaters and installations.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you would even see things like a DSQD and like an M2T sitting next to each other in a rack mount, possibly. Doing their separate jobs.
Yes, and yeah, exactly right. The M2T comes with the same thing. It comes with half the hardware. So if you buy a DSQD and an M2T, you have everything you need to rack mount them together.
We have another question. Since everything is going digital, does Lectrosonics consider having an AES option for their transmitters?
They're talking about AES inputs, and it's something we've looked at. So far, we haven't designed it in, but it's something that we're considering.
We'll look into it. Very good. Very good questions, everyone. If you have any, keep them coming. Why don't we keep going? So we talked about the DSQD. I think the last one in the chain of the digital ecosystem of receivers is the M2R. You touched on it, but why don't we dive into it?
Sure. And I think probably the easiest way to talk about it is to compare and contrast it with the DCHR, which is they're related to each other. I mean, the M2R came along first, and it was designed as a IFB type or in-ear monitor type receiver. It's got a heck of a headphone amp in it. It's got a volume control on it. It's designed for listening, and these have become quite popular for boom IFB return because the quality is good. It's very, very quiet. And one of my favorite stories is showing this to a guy who was in town working on a series here in Albuquerque, and we get more and more movies and TV series here all the time. So I brought this down to have him check it out, and he told me that, good and bad, the good news and the bad news. Boom Op loves it. Bad news is now we can hear things like refrigerators running in the next room. So it's like the noise floor is so
the
low
noise floor is wild. Yep.
Yeah, so that's the M2R, and there's really a ton of stuff in here. And once we came out with the DCHT, people started realizing, hey, I can pair these up as a camera hop, and they started doing that. But there's a couple hoops you have to jump through to make that work. For one thing, the headphone amp in this wasn't protected from phantom power. And so you got to get a phantom blocking cable if there's ever any chance that you might turn on phantom on the M2R. But some of the features that are in there, particularly Flex List, gives you the ability to set up, I think it's 16 different mixes that you can listen to, and then just scroll through them with the buttons. And they can be mono or stereo mixes. So I know the Reality guys really started jumping on that because they could set up this list to listen in for either camera hop or IFB listen mode, and just pick off by name, which feed they want to listen to. So that became a very popular feature. And we started expanding on it from requests from these guys, including the ability to copy that list from unit to unit and things like that. So that's the Flex List feature inside the M2R. So then looking at the DCHR, what's different about it? detachable antennas. That was a must for a, quote unquote real receiver, if you want to look at it that way. Also a locking, connector. It's a TA5, so you can get your 2 analog output audio channels or 2 AES digital channels, so you can come directly out of the unit digitally. And then it's also still got a headphone amp. So it's, as I mentioned before, it can be used as a channel monitoring device or even just as one more IFB receiver, and the sound quality is spectacular. And then I'm trying to think what else the differences are. Both of these units, by the way, have the same battery door arrangement, and it's the same as in the LT and the DBU transmitters. So the LT batalim can be used on either one of these for a battery eliminator to power it externally from a camera.
Excellent.
Or a bag. And, both of these, like the LR when it first came out, displays on the front, not on the top. So yes, we know they weren't designed for the bag, but we're seeing them in bags. I mean, there's tons of LRs out there as a utility receiver in bags, and I think the DCHR is going to be like that as well.
Excellent. We have another question. What is the dynamic range of the transmitters? So that's a very broad question. So why don't we just start with the digital SMs and circle back to talk about these guys? What's the dynamic range of these new puppies?
112 dB A-weighted, so it's quite good. It's a little bit better than the hybrid, which was always very good. I think the noise floor sounds different. Most people have reported to me that the new digital ones, it doesn't sound like there's a noise floor at all. And of course there is. There is in everything. But I've noticed it too, that with the digital transmitters like our DHU handheld, for instance, we did some tests up at Gordon's Church not too long ago. And I was amazed at the clarity of the sound and the lack of noise floor. And that's the kind of reports we're getting from people using these as well. So very, very nice improvement in sound quality. The phase response is very linear. We did a test with our plug-on because, like the old TM400, using a HMA and a single-channel receiver is used for sound system alignment. So we put the new digital one on the smart system, and man, it's just so flat, both phase and frequency response, from 20 to 20 kilohertz. Speaking of that, just audio specs wise, in case people don't know, but the HDM mode, the one sacrifice is that it is the top end frequency response is 16 kilohertz, not 20. So it's not that much of a sacrifice. I challenge most people to be able to tell the difference, but the gain is quite substantial. It's half the occupied bandwidth. So normally our transmitters and most transmitters of this type occupy about 200 kilohertz roughly. And they fit into what's called the ETSI mask, which was designed in Europe. It's like a standard that the signal has to fit into. And if you take a spectrum analyzer and zoom really closely in, you can see that shape. It's like a triangle. And so most like D2 mode, NA hybrid, these are all kind of fit into about 200 kilohertz. The new HDM mode fits into 100 kilohertz. So it's half the occupied bandwidth. But by running it at a low power and with a new output design, you're able to stack them very closely together, about 200 kilohertz apart, and not have to do frequency coordination because the intermod products are so low in level as to not be an issue. So you can imagine if you can set them at 200 kilohertz apart, how many you can get into an open TV channel, and that was exactly the goal. So that's what HDMO is all about. I know no one was asking, but I figured I'd throw that detail in there.
And you're going to be talking a lot more about that mode at the Sound Summit in a couple days. Is that right?
Yes, we've gotten a lot of questions about HDM mode, and we've got people out there already using it and getting, good results. And the way they would put it is, it's surprisingly good. It's, yes, you'll get better range than you think, and it sounds really, really nice. But yes, so we've got a detailed video on HDM mode specifically coming out at the Sound Summit on Thursday.
Well, we'll be sure to check it out and report on it too. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, what is the dB of the noise floor for the DBSM and DBSMD?
Well, I figured someone would stump me at some point, and that's the one. I don't know. I'd have to look that up.
It's quiet. Let's just put it.
It's quiet. It's very quiet.
It's quiet.
And that, a lot of that's going to depend on your microphone. In a lab environment, if you just stuck a dummy load on this thing, it's incredibly quiet. But lav mics introduce a certain amount of noise, and how they're wired will affect that as well. which variant of the mic. Some mics are designed for high level and aren't particularly quiet and don't need to be. Some mics are very sensitive and very, very quiet. And so it's going to depend mostly on that. That's the limiting factor in most systems.
Everything is going to change. Everything
Yeah.
changes depending on the impedance of the microphone and the connection that it has with the input of the transmitter.
That's right. And servo only is the wiring we recommend if it's compatible with your mic. And we've got wiring charts on our website about that. And just the side point is the input on the DBSM. That's the same input we've been using on the SM series and most of our transmitters for the past at least 10 years, closer to 15. So this is the servo input. So like servo only wiring is going to be the quietest and the lowest distortion. And it's usually the simplest wiring that doesn't take very many components or resistors.
Perfect. That's very good. So everybody's going to have an easy time. They're just going to get them, and it's going to work with the lavs that they already have.
That's the idea. Yeah, if they got lavs wired for Lectrosonics SM type series and servo input, they'll work on these.
Yep. Where do we go from here? We just finished talking about all of the digital receivers and the digital SMs and how they play together. What do you want to talk about next? Do you maybe want to talk about some scenarios of different things, like if people were doing different types of things, or where do you want to go?
Yeah, one thing I want to mention too, and we've got questions about this, is wireless designer connectivity with these various units. And of course, they don't connect to the transmitters directly, but wireless designer is really a fabulous tool, and it's evolved a lot since it was introduced in 2015. Hard to believe it was that long ago. But it was designed originally to go with our DR digital system, which was our second generation digital product. And now we're on our fourth generation. And so wireless designer continues to evolve. We've just added a zones feature, which we're going to be doing some training and probably a video on fairly soon. And what it allows you to do is have different zones, like imagine different studios or different ballrooms, that can all be on your coordination list together, and you can decide how they interact with each other or not. So you can keep one list, one project file, one session file, and again, decide which zones interact with each other. Like a ballroom next door or a studio next door, you might want to incorporate those frequencies into your frequency coordination calculations, but the one 2 studios away is far enough away that you don't need to worry about it, but you can still have it in there. So the questions come up about connectivity with wireless designer. At this time, the DSQD is the only one that talks to wireless designer. And that's by design. It's a rack unit. Wireless designer is often used with rack type systems or cart type systems. But the DCR822 was designed from the beginning with the idea that wireless designer would connect to it. And that'll be the first time that we get it really into the bag and wireless designer use with a bag. So that's not quite done yet. We still have some coding to do to get everything talking, but that's in the works. I hope that comes out soon. Yeah,
that's fun.
And so, people have asked us about, what platforms wireless designer can be used on. Yeah. I personally use it on a pretty ancient Surface Pro 3, and it's been flawless all along. We have had that computer for 5 or 6 years at least, and it's just been great. There is no iOS version though of wireless designer. We're looking at that, but we understand that there's going to be a convergence too on Apple, that iOS and the desktop system will eventually be one system. So we're also, fingers crossed for that.
Mm-hmm.
I keep hearing different things about when that's going to happen, but
yeah,
that's a big thing for them to accomplish. But nevertheless, we're looking at that very thing. But I just usually recommend something like a Windows tablet or an Android tablet, something that can run Windows, or a Mac laptop. Some of those laptops are quite light and small. May not be the most convenient thing for a bag type situation, but that's where we are now. And I just wanted people to know that yes, it is planned for the 822. So that'll be the second digital receiver and the first bag system where people can use wireless designer.
Incredible. Is that maybe this year, do you think, or is that 3 weeks or 3 years away? This year?
Yeah, this year.
Love it.
Not 3 weeks, but hopefully not too much longer than that.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely be waiting for that. That's very exciting. Somebody's asking, do the DBSM start up as quick as the 822 and the DPR?
Does it start up as quick? Yeah. We have what's called Zippy on. When you press the button and hold it, bam,
Boom.
There you go. It's on and it's transmitting after about 2 seconds when you hold that button. And the same thing off, bam, it's off. So then if you want to do the one button push, short on cycle, then it's not going to be transmitting. Kind of like our old transmitters always, it's a RF off mode or safe mode where you can do tuning without having it be transmitting. But
That is such a good feature, by the way. As long as you know that that's what's going on,
Yeah.
I'm glad we're talking about it, because you're like, oh, why isn't this transmitting? But, having a quick on, be able to change all your settings, turn it off, and then when you need it, turn it on,
Exactly. And no one's asked, but let me say this too, that, you had pointed this out, Thomas, that these units are the same size and cross-section as the last series, the SMWB and SMDWB. So that means that the accessories for these units are one and the same. The pouches, the belt clips, things like that will fit on there. The battery eliminator actually goes all the way back to the SM series, the original. So the SM BAT-LM will work on these units. And then, one thing we didn't really talk about at all yet was the recording feature.
Oh, yeah.
Which, like the SMWB, we've got the place for the card slot is behind the battery door, and it's got a little gasket, so it's protected from dust and moisture. And we had a lot of requests with the SMWB series to do time code. And so we've done that with the DBSM. And there's 2 different time code cables. We had to make new ones because no one's got a time code input that's the same as the mic input until these units here. So that's right into the TA5. So we made 2 different accessory cables. This is the B&C variant. It's just a B&C connector on one end and the TA5F on the other. And then the other variant's the LEMO version for the LEMO 5 timecode connection. It's wired for the timecode send, not the timecode return. And they sync up in just a second. So all you'd need really is one of these cables for your set to come off the master clock, whatever that might be, or slate, and just jam sync these units, and it takes just seconds. So that's the timecode feature. And the other thing people have asked us is about the recording bit depth and sample rate. In the SMWB series, because those are hybrid transmitters, the hybrids, A to D conversion process was designed around 88.2 many years ago. So relatively easy to make those record at 44.1 without any fancy sample rate conversion. But people asked us to do this at 48. Well, these natively, the DBSM series and all of our digital transmitters are natively at 48 kilohertz sampling rate. So it's easy to record directly that native sample rate with no conversion at all, not even every other sample. So these record at 48 and extremely high sound quality with that recording method and time code. The other question that's come up is about the time code accuracy, and that's less than 1 part per million. So that would mean generally through the life of the battery on set that these units would stay within 1 frame. So they're very accurate.
Gotta love that. We got a bunch of questions coming in. What is the power draw on your receivers, the digital ones, of course? So why don't we talk about the A22 first and talk about the power draw of this guy? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that figures in the data sheet on the website. So I would direct you there, lectrosonics.com, look up products, digital, and this receiver, and it's right there in the data sheet. I'm not sure there's battery runtimes for that, but we generally, for transmitters, we do have a little battery runtime chart, and there's a comprehensive one on the new transmitters. So all that data is in the data sheets on the website. I apologize for not having all those figures memorized.
No, and I think that's fine. Honestly, knowing 100,000 specs of every single product is almost near impossible. So, if anybody has any questions about that, that's another thing is, you can always ask us at True Audio. Give one of your local sales reps a call at one of these 5 locations, and, we can help you and talk about, upgrading into this digital ecosystem if you guys would like to play with these. Will the DCHR work with the DPR-A, and do they both cover the A and B block since they're digital? Yes, and the answer is yes to both. The DCHR has got both stereo receiver modes, like the encrypted DCH-X
and the unencrypted duet stereo modes, but it also has the D2 mode and the HDM. So you could use a digital plug-on, the DPR, DPR-A, in the D2 mode with the DCHR.
Good question. And the last one right now, does the 822 scan frequencies faster than the digital hybrid receivers? So, I mean, in theory, it doesn't take too long. It's somewhere between, what, I would say 5 and 10 seconds?
Yeah, it's quite fast, you know, and it covers a lot of bandwidth. I mean, and that was the other part of the question that just asked is, you know, does the DCHR and the DPRA cover both the A1 and the B1 bands?
Oh, right.
And the answer
Sorry.
is yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, and I forgot it. My bad. I asked it, and then I just
right.
blew past it. My bad.
Yeah, so in terms of scanning speed, the DCHR is the fastest of all. It's very, very quick. The 822 is quite fast as well. And just to remind people that, you know, that scan's covering 144 megahertz. So to consider how much it has to scan and how quickly it does it, it's pretty amazing. To think that scanning years ago was only 25 meg wide and it would take, you know, 30 seconds.
There's a block.
So it's not much, you know, it doesn't take much more time than that to cover 144 meg now.
For sure, for sure. Very good. So, you know what, I think we've talked a lot about all of the professional transmitters, obviously the new digital SM transmitters, all of the receivers that they play nice with. I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, the other end of this spectrum, which is dealing with all of the IFB systems. Can we talk a little bit about your digital IFB and how those play on a set, be it in an ENG bag or on, you know, a film set, cart-based setup?
Sure enough, yeah. So digital IFB, that would be the M2T or DCHT transmitter. So these will sound familiar, and that's why I wanted to, you know, this whole idea of the ecosystem. This is, the DCHT is the portable battery or externally powered stereo transmitter. And, you know, you don't have to transmit a stereo signal. You can send 2 mono channels. One of the really nice thing about this is, you know, with digital is you get really good channel separation of like 80 plus dB. So you can be sending 2 different distinct audio feeds into the DCHT or into one channel of the M2T, and then pick that up with 2 separate, you know, M2Rs or DCHRs. So it really gives you some flexibility. And I know people are using that type of system out there, is to use a DCHT in a bag as a IFB transmitter and feed it with 2 separate feeds, and then pick it up with the same frequency, but use the mixer function in the M2R to decide which of the 2 audio channels you want to be listening to. So it's very flexible that way. And again, I know I love reading and talking to people about the creative ways that they're using this system, because, you know, we try to build in a ton of flexibility, and yet we're still surprised by the interesting and clever ways people are using this.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, you don't know until you get to set what they're going to throw at you. So you need versatile equipment that can do anything. So, and, you know, another thing that I want to touch at is that the DCHT, one of the great things is you can see that the battery door there slides out of the way. You can put one of your battery eliminators in so you can run it in your bag and not have to throw batteries in it every few hours, right?
Exactly right. And then there's a top switch on that unit that can mute the unit, for instance, which is kind of nice. So it's got a, you know, you can use that as your power on off. It can be a mute switch or just bypassed altogether if you'd rather not have it, you know, engaged. So then the M2T is the rack version of this thing, and it's got 2 stereo transmitters in it. So in a sense, it can feed 4 mono IFB feeds off of a half rack unit, and it's got Dante connectivity as well as analog. So also a very flexible unit. Both units transmit at either 50, 25, or 10 milliwatts. And, you know, if it's if you're fairly close in or like in a controlled environment in a studio or whatever, 10 milliwatts turns out to be quite good with this unit. If you're outside and you need a little bit more range, you could use a directional antenna or a helical and turn it up to 50 and get surprising range out of it. And again, so you've got the flexibility of sending stereo feeds over this unit or mono feeds. Depends on how you want to use it, but that flexibility is there. And you have control over the audio input level and trim individually on each audio channel. So it's got a lot built into it. And I know a lot of folks are using this very kind of setup, again, with M2T in a rack, paired up with a Venue 2 or a DSQD, and then the bag system would be a DCHT, talking to the same set of receivers, the M2Rs and the DCHRs. And all of these cover the 470 to 608 band contiguously, so it's A1 and B1 built into all of these.
It's incredible because, like, right now, I'm just thinking of all the different possibilities. So if you're saying the M2T, I mean, an easy way to think of it, it would be two of these guys inside of this chassis, right?
Yes,
so
with Dante added. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you've got an 888 or a Scorpio, I mean, I like the Scorpio option for this because you can just have that one Dante cable going straight into there, and then you can throw all of the channels into that. How many channels can go into the M2T then to broadcast out?
Well, up to 4.
Up to 4.
You know, you can bring them in on the Dante channels, pick off which ones, you know, with Dante controller that you want to be feeding into it.
Yep.
And then fire away.
And there you go. There you go. Very, very fun. Very fun. Well, what do you think here? I don't see any other questions. If anyone has any other questions for Carl, please let us know. We're here to here to take it home.
Yeah, good question so far. I appreciate the you know, the interest out there, and glad to hear people are finding interesting uses for these and maybe thinking about what to use them for. Mm-hmm. And yeah, great to see that.
You know what? Let's talk about one more thing too. Obviously,
Sure.
You know, we're talking a little bit of the IFB with, you know, the M2Rs and the M2Ts. What about the new IFB R1Bs? Why don't we just throw that in? You know, because these are such a
Sure.
great system for cart-based setups.
Yeah, absolutely. The IFB R1B, the idea was to get a much smaller IFB receiver than the old R1A, which was around for 20 years and was a fabulous product for us, and there's still thousands and thousands of them out there. This one, we wanted to make it small, but we also wanted to add the feature of dock charging capability. So these units, there's a companion dock that will charge just the individual batteries or the units. And this was designed really for studios where, you know, you could set these charging docks up and people can walk in and out, and you would label the receivers with the talent's name or the correspondent, and they come in, pick up their unit, turn it on and use it, slot it back, and they'll run for 8 hours on these batteries. These are our LB50 rechargeable lithium ion packs, the same ones that are used in the SSM micro transmitter. So the other thing that's different about these is that they have a little bit of a quieter noise floor than the older units, and also they have 10 presets programmable into the unit rather than just using the button to press down and to hop or scan. You can actually program 10 frequencies into this pretty easily through the front display. So that's the IFB R1B in a nutshell. It's still analog, it still picks up one channel of audio. And sometimes we get compatibility questions about that too, like, can I use the IFB R1B, you know, with an M2T? And once again, you've got an analog receiver trying to use it with a digital transmitter, and that's not going to work.
Yeah.
You know, IFB receivers have always only done one mode, and that's IFB, analog receiver mode. But the M2R does have an IFB mono compatibility mode in it. So if you do want to think about the M2R serving double duty, that could be used with a digital type IFB system or a camera hop system, that's fine. And then in a pinch, put it to IFB mode and tune into that frequency.
So you could tune into like the IFB T4?
You could, yeah, exactly. T4 or any one of our hybrid, you know, transmitters set to IFB mode.
Right, yeah, literally any of the transmitters that can go into that compatibility mode. Like this literally could go into that mode if you wanted it to.
Not this one.
Oh, not
but
this one.
The predecessor, the HMA can.
The HMA, this one, sorry.
HHA, right.
That
yeah,
one.
there you go. HMA can do that, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So any of the hybrid transmitters can do that IFB mode. And then there's the, right, like you said, the T4, which can do hybrid transmission mode as well as IFB mode. And that's the system. I mean, you know, analog IFB system, it's been very popular for a long time due to the robustness and, you know, reasonable sound quality. It's gotten better, you know, with the new small receivers.
Absolutely. You've pretty much perfected that analog system throughout the years, and now you're diving into this digital system that, you know, has, you know, in my opinion, better transmission capabilities, quieter noise floor, just a better overall sound. I'm excited about this. So Donovan Murphy says, I love that the 822 doesn't require you to have the first channel on a lower frequency than the second channel. Why don't we talk a little bit about what he's talking about?
Yeah, he's referring to SR type receivers. The older series had that issue where you had to have channel 2 higher than channel 1, which could restrict some flexibility there. But even with the SRC, that's not the case, and it's certainly not the case with 822.
Yep, very good. Yeah, lots of algorithms to figure out all of this frequency.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys do it. Yeah.
Receivers are tough. That's takes a lot of art to design a really good receiver. No question.
I bet. Well, Carl, I think that this is probably. Do you have anything else to add?
I think we covered a lot here, and I've already encouraged everyone to tune in at the Sound Summit and see more details about HDM.
Please
That's
do.
a very exciting tool. Certainly not for every situation, but it's going to be the right tool for certain situations, and we're excited to see people using it already. You know where to reach me. I'm out there on Facebook, here at Lectrosonics. Pick up the phone, send me an email, send me a message. Love to answer any specific questions if you have them. And look forward to seeing people at the next live trade show, which we don't know exactly when that's going to be, but in the fall, we are told. NAB is supposed to happen in October in Las Vegas. Look forward to seeing people there.
We might have some things cooked up too, so we'll see.
Yeah, in person, that'll be awesome. But in the virtual world, there's events coming up. Like I said, Sound Summit's the next thing. It's coming very, very soon. Look forward to seeing everybody there. And other than that, I look forward to talking to everyone.
Love it. And I want to just personally thank you again. I know it's been almost a month, but your cameo in the April Fools was just amazing. So if anyone hasn't seen it, go check it out on our YouTube channel. It's called True AI, and just enjoy a laugh on us. We had a great time. Thank you for being here today, Carl. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Thomas.
All right.
Appreciate it.
If anyone, forget that one. If anyone is interested in purchasing any of these items today in the digital ecosystem, there's a lot that you can do, and there's a lot of products. We'd love to talk to you about it. So give us a call. Our sales reps are standing by. We have 3 locations in the USA and 2 up in Canada. We'd love to help you. Guys, thank you so much, Carl. We'll see you on another one.
All right. Take it easy.
Take care, everyone. Bye.